What's up, college sports fans? I'm Stucky.
I'm Colin Wilson.
I'm Mike Calabrese.
I'm Maria Marino.
I'm Charlie DiSturco, and we're excited that the Big Bets on Campus brand is launching its very own YouTube channel.
You'll be able to find every episode of the BBOC podcast, live shows, and other college sports content on this new channel.
Not only will the channel be dedicated to betting on college sports, but you'll also be able to find exclusive interviews with former college athletes,
college football power rankings,
and updates on other topics like the brand new College Football 25 video game series and the ins and outs of the recruiting trail all the way down to the transfer portal.
Whether you're into college football,
college basketball,
college baseball, or any of the college sports,
we are the home for college sports, and BBOC is the channel for you.
Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the action. I'll see you there.
Welcome into the Action Network podcast, presented by our friends at BetMGM. Brendan Glasheen, joined by Sean Kerner and Chris Raybon for our episode that features NFL player props. How to bet NFL player props with Chris and Sean. So, to start us off, we did the fantasy football pod last week, early last week. That was released to the people. But to set the record straight, a.k.a. get people that might be new to the two of you to listen to you both, qualifications as to why folks should listen to Chris and Sean. So, Chris, why don't you start us off why you are a person to listen to as it pertains to player props?
Yeah, well, first of all, don't take my word for it. Listen to yourself first. But if you do want to listen to somebody else, I think I and Sean are a great place to start. I have over 3,500 bets tracked in the Action Network app, including over 1,400 props for my 118,000 plus followers. 57% win rate across all bets. Profitable in all four of the major sports: NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB. 200 games over 500 on props. I am 62% in terms of the win rate on NFL props, up 96.5 units. And in terms of my process and projections, just like Mr. Kerner over here, who's even better, I have been top 5 multiple times in Fantasy Pros' in-season player projection accuracy, which is crucial for betting NFL props week to week, and also season-long as well, which is great for season-long props. We're both top 5 in season-long accuracy over the past 3 years.
Sean Kerner, don't be shy. I'll give you a minute to brag about yourself.
1 minute? Okay, yeah, so, I mean,
well,
I've been
more if you want, but come on.
I'll stick to a minute. I've been a profitable props bettor for nearly 2 decades now. I think the first prop I ever bet was actually a Albert Pujols prop when he was just in his third year of the league, so that's how long ago that was. But yeah, I already make projections for fantasy football. That's kind of how I started getting into this, and I've won the contest Raybon mentioned, the Fantasy Pros weekly accuracy contest now 4 times. I've won a couple other like season-long contests. So, player projections are my thing, and that's really, we'll get to that part of my process when it comes to player props. NFL is, probably my favorite and top sport when it comes to player props, but when I have time, I also dabble with college football player props, and when NFL's off season, I attack, college basketball, March Madness, baseball, I already mentioned that, NBA, WNBA, and whatever sports, I have time to look into, and I think I have an edge on.
So yes, be sure to follow Sean and Chris Raybon in the free award-winning Action Network app. As Chris mapped out, he's got a great following, so does Sean. It's pretty, speaks for itself, the track record for both of those guys. And once we get into the season, regularly scheduled programming on our YouTube page. If you're watching this particular episode, be sure to subscribe to our Action Network YouTube page, and you can find these guys popping in on shows, short form video, whatever the case may be. So for this episode, we're going to dive into a whole bunch. The pillars to betting NFL player props, as well as some of the challenges, important tools and resources, the process as Sean kind of mapped out, and he'll get to that as we continue in this particular episode. So big picture start here, Chris. How can a regular listener or even a new listener become good at this, become good at betting NFL player props? What does success look like? And I know that's a long-term thing to get successful.
Well, I'll start with the easiest way, and that is simply what we mentioned at the top. Download the Action Network app, follow Sean Kerner, follow myself, Chris Raybon, and you will literally get alerts the second we bet any prop. It will come right to your phone. You will see the line, you will see the player, you will see all the information you need to go bet that prop yourself. That's why we both have over 100,000 followers and counting on the Action Network app. We've been highly successful, and I know countless people that have been highly successful doing it as well. So that's the first thing, because the key with the player prop market is that these lines are not being a lot of effort is not being put in by the books compared to, say, setting a line for a side or a total. And so these lines are going to move very quickly. They're usually not going to be as sharp. And so if you the cheat code, you could just follow us. We're doing the legwork. We're doing the player projections. That's really the biggest edge, is being able to have somebody you trust that does that legwork, because there's no bigger edge than in betting props than actually having projections. You don't need to. You can do kind of back of the envelope math, but the key is really, when you're looking for a prop, it's not always going to be even juice on each side, right? It's not always going to be minus 110 like a spread or a total. So I'd say one of the key things, understand what the different juice means. A minus 150, for example, means a 60% implied probability. A plus 150 means 40% implied probability. Your bets are dictated by whether you think the outcome is more or less likely than that juice. If something is plus 150, and you think that it's more like 50-50, then you should be betting that, and you could do something as simple as, let's say it is a receiving yardage under. You can go to a guy's game logs and say, okay, the line is 35.5. He's been under that 6 times. He's been over that only 4 times. That's about 60%. Maybe I'll even look back at his career, and it's kind of the same story. So I think roughly there's a 60% chance that he goes under, and I'm getting value there. And that's how you bet props. But as Sean will, I'm sure, go into detail on, we're creating models for, each individual market. We're projecting every player's receiving yards and passing yards and rushing yards and all that good stuff each week for NFL. And sometimes we do it for other sports in the offseason as well. And that's how we're kind of doing it. So that's why that's the easiest way. But if you want to kind of get into it yourself, you just need to kind of understand the juices and those probabilities and figure out some way to get an idea of what the true probability of that outcome is, whether it's something as simple as back of the envelope math, as I mentioned, whether it's something as complicated as, throwing a bunch of data in a spreadsheet or AI or algorithm and creating your own. But that's basically it. You're just betting on probabilities, and you generally want to target unders too, because books are shading lines to the over. Even if it's only by that 0.5, unders have been more profitable pretty much every single year I've ever bet props. I don't think I'm at 2 decades yet, like Sean, but I'm not far behind, and I don't ever remember a year where overs have been more profitable than unders.
Yeah, Sean, I already have a tingly feeling, because it makes me think about when I've worked with you and taking folks behind the curtain a bit, whether it be a Thursday standalone game or a Monday standalone game, and you're ready to come on a show or you're ready to do a record, and you've got a player in mind, a receiver, a running back, it's longest rush, or it's receiving yards for a game, longest catch, or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. And something you can definitely speak to is lines move rapidly after you might give out a play, or someone that's well respected in the business gives out a play. And that also speaks to the importance of maybe having multiple accounts to make sure you capitalize on the market when you're surfing around.
So when it comes to player props, if I'm giving one out on Green Dot Daily, it kind of goes to what Raybon was talking about, is the markets don't have as much action as, say, the spread and total markets. So it doesn't take much action to start moving the prop. But, if I give out a prop, there's going to be a lot of other people that bet it at the same time. So books tend to, I don't say freak out, but they tend to move it quicker because they notice all this activity. So that's why I kind of emphasize watching these shows, getting, our notifications in the app, because these do tend to move really fast, especially when we give them out. It's like
the Steve Carell Office scene. where he starts losing his mind and everyone's peeking their head into his door, like, oh my God, he did it! Something's happening. That's what the books are doing, right? Something like that.
So I would say something like that, probably behind the scenes. But you made another point where I think it's critical to have access to as many books as possible because most books are pretty much in line when it comes to spreads and totals, but just based on how player props and how they work, you can find some books are off by a handful of yards, and as Raybon mentioned, that's key. Just getting a few extra yards, over the long run, that's going to help your win percentage as well. So you're always trying to get the best numbers, and having more access to more books and numbers is only going to help.
Chris, let's talk about the pillars, and we'll try our best here to keep it, because I know you can use your ideologies on the pillars of prop betting can fit a lot of different sports, but focusing strictly on NFL, what are some of the pillars that people need to know?
Well, I always start with telling people, make sure you kind of accustom yourself with thinking negatively. And what I mean by that is look for unders, because you can make all kinds of other prop bets, but I think unders are always going to be the cornerstone for the simple fact that, again, having done this for such a long time, I don't think I've ever seen any time period where unders were taking more action than overs. Overs are always the side that is most bet, and therefore not only are books shading their lines on the open to the over, but more often than not, the lines are going to move toward the over. So they're going to move up. So you're going to get more value, even if it's contrarian, because a lot of people like a guy. Like a lot of times they're, Travis Kelce is the most bet prop, and 99% of the action on the over, and it'll go up 5-7 yards. And as Sean mentioned, those are very valuable in the prop market, and you could just come and bet the under. So I think yardage unders for the NFL now, specifically yardage unders, are going to be your bread and butter more often than not. Receiving, rushing, passing in that order. And same thing for if you're going to do like longest catch or run. Just because in the NFL, not only is there all this randomness and unpredictability and small sample issues with the 17-game season and the short career spans, but you also have the straight up injury issues that, more than any other sport, guys are liable to miss a handful of plays due to an injury. They're liable to get hurt and miss the entirety of the game. And then you're under cashes as long as that player played one snap, even if it was on special teams. So unders are going to be the way that you make profit. Like that's really what, even if you don't do anything else well, you need to learn unders. If you like betting overs, do that in addition to getting good and familiarizing yourself with unders. Volume props are next up. Those are volume, receptions, carries, pass completions, pass attempts. Those are going to be ideal when you expect a change in playing time. Usually a guy getting less playing time or somebody else getting more playing time, which will then affect another player who's going to get less. Because again, I like to target unders, but you can do it with overs as well, especially with rookies. Maybe he's going to get more snaps this week because of the matchup or whatnot. Categorical props, those are a lot better to me than, and when I say categorical, I just mean any specific one prop, like any specific market, receiving yards, carries. Target individual markets and try to get good at maybe one or two markets. Like maybe you just focus on receivers and you're mostly betting on receptions and yardage and things like that, because a lot of times what's being marketed these days is win big on same game parlays. And don't get me wrong, those are fun as long as you know that they're a very low likelihood to hit, because all your bets have to hit. The correlation stacks the odds against you, and you might have 4 good bets, but you put it in a parlay, and now that 5th one, for whatever reason doesn't hit, and you lost. Now you lose all your bets. So don't try to figure out how to create the perfect same game parlay. Just try to get good at a couple markets, and then those parlays will naturally come to you without you having to put much effort in, because you'll just be like, oh hey, I like 3 or 4 props, or Sean's on these 4 receiver props in the same game, and they're kind of a little correlated here. 3 receiver props and a quarterback or something like that. So get good at the actual individual markets, understand them, and then all that other stuff will kind of naturally come to you. And one other thing I would say is pillar wise is that beware of markets where you can only bet on one side. Now, what do I mean by that? Instead of it being an over or an under, and you can bet on either the over or the under, there's certain markets where, for example, will a player score a touchdown? You can only bet on the yes outcome. You can't bet on the no outcome. Those markets the odds tend to be stacked against you even more. The true odds tend to be inflated even more than the normal 10% that the book is taking, and because it's hard for people to kind of calculate that, when you're looking at like a whole game's worth of player odds for scoring a touchdown, you see a whole bunch of plus 200, plus 300. It doesn't occur to you that those probabilities probably add up to much more than whatever it should. And you're kind of just losing value that way. So you could do it kind of for fun and pick your spots, but in general, you want to be picking props where you can bet either outcome, a yes or a no, and that'll give you opportunities, even in rare cases, to middle. If for example, you're on a guy, you like a guy, and you pick him to go over. I know this happens with Sean. He'll bet on some guy, some scrub, to go over, and the guy will go up 10 yards, and now it's like, hey, I might want to get some action on the under now too, because the line went up too far. So those are my pillars as far as NFL prop betting.
Yeah, I think that's a good tease for the challenges of betting player props. I think timing is a huge factor. I think that aspect is fascinating. The timing, say it's Monday morning and you're waiting, or whatever, it's Friday and you're waiting for numbers to come out for that next Sunday or whatever, or maybe it's Wednesday waiting for Thursday or Tuesday waiting for a Thursday night game, etc. Anything to add there, Sean, as far as pillars, things that you're considering in any given week?
No, I mean, just to piggyback what Raybon said in terms of, most props tend to go under. I agree what he's talking about, where if you look at like the betting percentages of what percent of bets have come in on a prop, oftentimes you'll see like, 99% of the action was on Dalton Kincaid's over. Like everybody loves betting overs. They love rooting for overs. So we always say you kind of want to like embrace rooting for unders. But also just there's a lot of underlying factors that tend to lead to unders. Again, the line's kind of inflated, and kind of digging into the math of it. If I'm projecting a player for like 86 receiving yards and his props, 86 and a half, I'm actually showing a handful of yards of value on the under, because when it comes to projections, you're looking at a guy's season-long stats, his averages. That's the average. But oftentimes the median is actually a handful of yards lower, based on a whole host of reasons. But that's just kind of how something like yards are distributed. So typically I think that the market actually overlooks that. But also there's just way more outs when it comes to the under. Raybon mentioned they could leave the game due to an injury. They could leave the game due to an ejection, a benching. There's just a whole other host of reasons why someone would leave the game early. So there's a lot more outs when it comes to unders, and I think the market tends to overlook that. And they want to root on a guy catching the ball and getting yards and things like that. So I think it's just coming to kind of embrace why that is, and just realizing that more times than not, there's going to be value on the under.
Let's dive into challenges to betting player props against sides and totals. And Chris kind of adhered to this earlier about sides and totals. The books are a bit more on it across the board. But when there's edges earlier in a week, Chris, like I'm just thinking of this example now, but when you first learned how to write a 5-paragraph essay when you were in middle school, you ask yourself the questions of who, what, when, where, and why. So I got the who, I got the player in mind, I got the what, the receiving yards or rushing yards or receptions, whatever, carries. Okay, now the when. And I think a lot of this, what you're about to get to, is it factors into timing. I think that's what may confuse a bettor. When's the right time to fire? And there are a lot of aspects into the challenges of that.
Well, first of all, most of my writing in middle school is actually in detention. They would make us write like 500 of the same sentence. Like, I will not talk in class. I will not misbehave in class. I will not be an absolute idiot to the teacher. Things like that. So I don't know about that other stuff. Yeah, right. But, in all seriousness, I'll get into some, technical things that are challenging when betting player props. But I think I would say the biggest challenge that listeners are going to encounter, that prop bettors are going to encounter, is their own biases. Because, we both already talked about how unders are generally going to be more profitable. And a lot of times with that, it's just, a lot of people, it just doesn't come naturally to bet on an under. A lot of times when I see people that are a bit newer to the betting space, and thank you, hop on board, glad to have you. But a lot of times what I see is they'll say, oh, this guy is absolutely going to go off today. He's got a great matchup. And they tend to only even think about betting a player prop when they think that player is going to do something good. And, related to that is I've heard other people say, well, it's no fun to root for a guy to go under. It's no fun to root for a guy to fail or whatnot. But don't think of it like that, because with biases, you have to kind of trick your mind into looking at it a different way. And the way you want to look at it, or at least the way that I would
quickly, Chris, too, the other thing, some people might go into a game and think that guy absolutely sucks and blows. And they think the opposite of that. I think there are some teams and some players that do feature players that think they absolutely suck, and maybe it could actually go the other way. I mean, more often than not, it's the first thing, like you said, but that other thing happens too, right?
Yeah, and so in those situations, because here's the thing with underdogs, even if you're just betting regular, when there's a trendy underdog, when it's too obvious, those are probably the ones that you want to stay away from, because usually on any given slate, there will be like one spot where it's like, okay, this guy's going to struggle, and everyone's kind of piling on that line, but then that makes the line go down, and then you're getting squeezed for value. So, in general, you want to kind of open it up to be prepared to bet any type of under. But the thing about betting unders and the way that it can be fun is because, let's say you're betting on Stephon Diggs under 65.5 receiving yards. When you're watching that Texans game, whoever they're playing, you're literally rooting for every other player on the Texans offense to have a good game. You're rooting for the Texans to have a good game and blow the other team out so they don't even have to pass that much. You can literally root for pretty much any other action to happen besides that one thing that you need to go under. So that's kind of the way I think to kind of acclimate yourself and get comfortable with unders. But some of the other challenges, just to list them off really quick, lines are up for a shorter duration of time. It's not like sides and totals where they come out like that Sunday afternoon for the next week. Like these props for Sunday usually come out maybe Thursday night, Friday night after that final injury report. You also need the side and total knowledge, and then, some player specific knowledge on top of that. The lines move faster, as we've talked about. They could come off the board if they're too, if they're really bad, which happens a lot less frequently with sides and totals. Limits are lower, so that you'll probably, if you're having success, you're almost going to need to have multiple accounts after a while, or you're not going to be able to get enough of your bankroll down on when you see an edge. Injuries are going to impact not just, the injured player in question, but there's going to be a cascade effect where it impacts, a whole bunch of other guys. There could be correlations. And then you just kind of need to be aware of, individuals, things that could just apply only to that matchup, weather, motivation, things that may have been said in the media, just all types of things like that. So those are some of the challenges in my eyes.
I would imagine in 2 decades of doing this, there must have been a challenge or two along the way. Sean?
Yeah, it was just getting better at it. But I'm going to flip this on its head. I embrace the challenges that props provide. I actually think it's easier to hone in on projections when it comes to props as opposed to sides and totals because it's more of a direct outcome. So you're only projecting how that specific player will do on that specific stat, not the entire team. You introduce a lot more variables when you include the entire team. So when it comes to player props, I'm pretty honed in on that exact stat, that exact player, that I'm much more confident in what my projected perceived edge would be. So I think that it actually lends to props, and why I love them so much is you're of a better handle on what you're actually projecting. And sometimes I can have an angle on a side total get it right, but there's some wacky, unpredictable play that leads to a different outcome. And that can certainly happen when it comes to player props, but it's a little bit less common. In our Discord, I have come up with a term for this called the Anzalone effect. There was a game, it was the Bears-Lions. I was saying that Alex Anzalone was playing out of his mind. He was really good at spying, rushing quarterbacks. And I thought the Lions had a pretty good game plan to slow down Justin Fields and the Bears offense. And that's exactly what happened. He had like 15 plus tackles in that game. But there was like a muff punt return for a touchdown, a pick six, another fumble, like all these wacky plays that, the game went way over. And I was just like, I should have just bet on Alex Anzalone over, 8.5 tackles. So sometimes you can get a player prop exactly right. And, it doesn't have an impact on the game. I just think that the unique thing with props is, I'm a very mathy guy. It's easier to actually hone in on the variables needed, and you're betting on a specific outcome. So I think you have more control over your process when it comes to props.
And you are consistent on this. I mean, I don't have specific examples at the top of my head, but just thinking back to when you would give out a particular play, and I think of the standalone games most because there's just a lot of other games on Sunday. But yeah, you're consistent on this. You eliminate the fluff to kind of, and you're kind of in some ways you're countering Raybon's initial takes on the challenges. But I think that's a fair counterpoint or another way of looking at it. This kind of blends well into our next talking point, which is important tools, resources, data points that you use each day throughout the course of an 18-week season. What should be the Bettors toolkit, if you will?
Well, the first thing you're going to need is something that gives you a bird's eye view of all the different lines available. So all the different props out there. I love using the Action Network app for that. We also have our props tool on Action Labs that not only has the lines and at different sites, but also has Sean or I or whoever's doing the projections there and the projected edge. That's also in the app as well. Action Network also just has a props page where you can just kind of like an odds page. So you always want to kind of be aware of the different lines out there and, see all of the different lines at the different sites at your fingertips so that you can, choose the best one or, maybe you're waiting for it to hit a specific number or it's moving or something. So you always want to kind of be aware of what's out there. You're going to need starting lineups, depth charts, up-to-date injury news. NFL injury reports are very important, because, that's a lot of times going to affect a lot of different players and their prop outcomes. If a left, let's say Andrew Thomas is out for the Giants, Daniel Jones may not have time to go deep to Jalen Hyatt. So this is probably not the time to bet a Jalen Hyatt over. I don't know if it was ever the time last year, to be honest, but things like that. You're also going to need some kind of, if you're doing this yourself, or if you're not just kind of following like an expert like Sean or I and just tailing, you're going to need access to some source of player data, because as you're researching props, you're going to have like a key question, like, Sean kind of alluded to it, like there's all these different challenges and they can be really fun. But there's going to be a key question. Usually it's, okay, so I'm thinking about betting Roschon Johnson's carries over and it's at 6.5. Well, you're probably going to want to know how many times he got, 7 or more carries, and maybe how many times he got that when Chicago was favored. So I like the sports reference sites if you just want, raw data that's easy to, copy and paste. Always have a spreadsheet open personally. I just love copy and pasting things, doing some quick math. You could easily highlight, filter, sort. You could do different formulas and create little mini models. I like to call them quickly for a specific outcome, so you don't have to go and be modeling the entire league like us crazy people over here. Also, just normal betting tools that people might overlook, like an odds converter. So, for example, we have a tool on the app where, and there are many of these out there online as well, and we have it on actionnetwork.com as well, where you could just type in -150 and it'll tell you that that's a 60% implied probability. You can also do that with like multiple bets for parlays and calculate the odds for a parlay if you enter multiple bets. So just kind of understanding those kind of raw things and having tools for those. So, and then data points. You also want to know the Vegas lines for the game in question, even if you're not betting a side or total, because the game script is very important in the NFL. When a team is a favorite, they're going to be in more positive game script. They'll probably run more. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. They'll probably pass less, but could be more efficient doing so. For receiving props, we both really love to look at route data, average depth of target, targets per route, market share, like target market share on his team, for air yards, for red zone, deep target, things like that. Rushing props, snap rates are very important. Running backs need to be on the field. In a lot of times it's situational. There's early down guys that would benefit, when their team is favored. There's more passing down, hurry up backs that will benefit more when their team is projected to be an underdog and trail more. And then for quarterbacks, quarterback, I don't find their lines to be as to have as much of an edge. Sean, maybe you feel different, but I find that they're a little sharper because quarterbacks are a little less volatile, more easy to project. But you want to, I think, have an understanding of pressure rates, what they do under pressure. Do they scramble? That can help with their rushing props, but take away from their passing. You want to understand their sack rate, how many times when they're pressured do they get sacked, their average depth of target. The deeper you throw downfield, the less efficient you'll be, but the higher upside. Just normal efficiency stats, and then defensive stats and tendencies. So how often does the defense get pressure, blitz, man coverage, zone coverage. And then finally, some idea of offensive line. PFF, for example, does the player grades. It has pressure, sack allowed data, because a lot of times that's where you're going to find the biggest edge is in the trenches, because it's just not something that the average, even hardcore NFL fan maybe is really looking at and taking into account when betting props. So you can really get a big edge by understanding, the offensive line, defensive line, pressures, schemes, things like that.
Sean, I know you don't want to give away too much in terms of how you do your process and how you would say. So a lot of times when you give out a prop during the season, you would say, I actually make this line here, or I actually project this many catches, or I actually project this many runs or this many yards for a particular player, whether it be a longest rush or total yards, all those kinds of examples. But for the listener, what can they do at a bare minimum? What can they do to for their process? To Chris's points about tools, resources, and data points.
Yeah, Raybon already mentioned it, but I think our Action Labs player prop tool is probably the best starting point, because again, you get to see our projections where we're showing an edge. You can see all the different sports books where they have the prop. Plus, I usually do go under the hood, and I usually go over my exact process when I'm giving out a prop. So if you were to listen to us giving out props, whether it's on a show or in an article, we're actually laying out exactly why we're arriving at it. So you can kind of learn through that, kind of our process, because every prop, it's going to be a different type of approach. But if you start doing it on your own, I think that when it comes to, diving into player prop betting, it's important to realize that there's no real right or wrong way to do it. I mean, I make, projections for every player, every stat, every week. You don't necessarily have to do that. But when you start your process, you don't necessarily have to bet, right out of the bat. You can just track where you might be, betting based on whatever your process is going, because you don't want to get trapped into, getting tilted that you lost, 3 bets, and then you start panicking, and that's how you get in trouble. So I think it's okay to just track the bets initially, hone in on your process, and don't get too caught up in the initial results. You might see that you would have had a winning week. Don't worry about it. Even if, you find that, oh my God, like I'd be down 7 units right now if I went with this process. Learn from your mistakes. Every time I lose a bet, I kind of go back and I look at, did I do something wrong? Was the process sound? So you're just going off experience. You're honing on your own unique approach. That's why I'm saying there's no right or wrong way. But over time, I think you're going to get better and better with that. And, as Raybon mentioned, I think that if you do want to take a player projection approach, I think something like PFF is a great resource, because they do have things like routes run data, man versus zone, things like that. So, you don't always have to just start making projections. You can kind of ease in whatever, skill set you think you have and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what Raybon said earlier about the challenges, like you have your own bias. So I'm not trying to tell people not to just listen to Sean and listen to Chris and just, Sean and Chris like this, so I'm going to do it too. I think bettors, new bettors, and even normal bettors, they want to put their fingerprints on the bet too. Yeah. And that's why it's key that you guys give some insights as to how, and Raybon did a really nice job of mapping out what is available to a bettor, whether it's a new bettor or an experienced bettor, to get information. It's just a matter of, I don't want to just bet it because Chris Raybon's betting it. I want to put the time in and the resource, and I want to find the resources too to feel like I'm educated and I know what I'm doing. So that's good stuff. Also, another great way to just get inside on Sean Kerner is you can join him on the discussion in the Action Network Discord channel. So you can follow the link to the Action Network Discord channel in the episode description. Should have said that off the top. So that's available to you as well. And Sean he's chatty in there. You might not hear his voice, but he types away in there. He's a man of the people in that Discord channel. You, Nick Giffen, I don't want to leave people out, but you guys are always in there as part of the predictive analytics team. Okay, so now we can get into the nitty gritty a little bit. Raybon, describe an ideal player prop betting opportunity heading into a game. If you need to use an example, do so.
So I'll actually start by, if I may pivot to NBA really quick, because I think people might understand this one because it was pretty recent. So sometimes these things are just going to pop up, especially if you start understanding the probability. So there was a situation where heading into the NBA Finals, Celtics versus the Mavericks, the MVP odds, the MVP props for the NBA Finals, Jason Tatum was the favorite at about minus 150. Which means he was about a 60% chance to win. And then Luka was next. I think he was just somewhere below 50%, maybe like plus 180 or something like that. And then there was just a pretty big gap. And Jaylen Brown was like plus 700. And immediately that stuck out to me like a sore thumb without having to do any, real spreadsheet work or math or anything like that. Because I'm like, wait a minute. Jaylen Brown just won the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. So at worst, maybe he's, let's say they played 3 series. He was definitely better than Tatum in one of them so far. So at worst, his odds should be, somewhere like 3-1 or something like that, plus 200 maybe. And so
Tatum was like minus 1. It got down to like even money at one point. And then I think Luka was at like 3-1. Yeah.
Right. So immediately, without having to type anything into a browser or a spreadsheet or do any type of math, you could just kind of see like, oh man, these odds are off because everyone just thinks Tatum is their best player, and the market's sleeping on Jaylen Brown, even though there are a lot. It didn't mean Jaylen Brown was more likely than Tatum to win. That's not why you bet him, but he was more likely than the plus 700 number implied, and that's what you care about when betting props. You do not expect to win every single one, but remember, you're not just betting with like sides or even the juice is even on each side. So you're going to have times when, for example, like you might see a prop where it's like Zach Ertz over 3.5 receptions at minus 200 or something like that. Let's just say that means that the books are saying Zach Ertz is going to get 4 or more catches 2/3 of the time. But if you think that true number is more like 75-80% of the time he gets at least 4 catches, then you should absolutely smash that minus 200 juice. But a lot of people kind of shy away when they see juiced up numbers because they are thinking they're getting bad value, not realizing that the value doesn't come from the juice. It comes from the edge you have over the juice. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But I think some other great examples are just taking advantage of recency bias. The NFL is an extremely small sample. You only play 17 games plus, give or take in a year. And so there's a lot of randomness, a lot of things that there could be a string of 2, 3, 4 games of a certain outcome. That does not mean it's going to continue. So anytime like let's touchdowns, for example, even the best players in the league tend to not score or average 1 touchdown per game. Right. So if a guy has scored a touchdown in 3 or 4 straight games, number one, coaches are going to be saying, okay, we got to do everything we can not to let this guy not get in the end zone. And number two, his odds are going to go, tilt in favor of him scoring yet again. And so, you can kind of fade him, and, not all books offer touchdown nose. So, that's maybe a bad example, but let's say he got over 100 yards, in 4 straight games. That's a really hard thing to do, period, much less 4, 5, 6 straight games. So just betting against the trends, could be in contrarian, even if you're betting contrarian overs, like let's say a guy had like some really bad games. If he's, as long as his underlying usage is good, and what I mean by that is, if a guy maybe has 4 or 5 games where he's like under 30 receiving yards, but he's running a route on 85-90% of the dropbacks, like he's in the game, he's not coming off the field very often. Eventually, the laws of statistics say that he's gonna get a couple catches and gain some yards, and that line has been coming down in the interim, so you're getting value there too. So that's generally the best way to bet NFL. Just bet against the recent trends, as long as you have some type of underlying data point or usage or whatever, not to hang your hat on, to that makes you think that that gives you reason to believe that it's not going to continue.
One of us is not like the others here, and I'll let the people make that judgment on their own. But like one that personally that comes to mind, because you mentioned the touchdown thing, quarterback rushing yards is something that I think about, right? That has its ups, it has its sways from week to week too. Just speaking specifically to the kinds of props you guys are talking about,
kneel downs, because the kneel downs they can throw a wrench in
just
that
yards generally. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Or just that particular game plan that week. Not just what the defensive coordinator might be saying in a given week to not allow something to happen, but the other flip side of it, with now so many offensive coaches, they're like, hey, they're going to be expecting this. We're going to pivot and be more multiple. And I know you can think of a couple. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is like a Kyle Shanahan, for instance, when you have so many great skill players, which that's something to think about too. When you have a great team and there's just a lot of mouths to feed. And like you used the Stephon Diggs thing earlier, like, well, the benefit of taking an under on Stephon Diggs, and you're a Texans fan, you can still root for Tank Dell and Nico Collins and CJ Stroud, and you can still be a happy bettor and be a happy fan. What about you, Kerner? When you an ideal player prop betting opportunity going into a standalone game or a Sunday slate?
Yeah, so I mean, just at a high level, I base most of my prop bets initially on my projections and where I calculate the percent chance that they're going to go over or under their prop. So typically, if I'm showing greater than say a 58% chance that they're going to go over under a minus 115, say money line, I flag that and I look into it and I try to see if my projection makes sense. I think about if the underlying factors make sense. But I think a more specific example from last year where I kind of merged the two was on a quarterback prop. And as Raybon mentioned, quarterbacks, when it comes to their passing yard props, there's a wider range of outcomes. So I'm typically not betting on them. But I did notice that Tim Boyle, I was showing about a 56% chance he would go under his passing yards.
Did not think Tim Boyle would come up on this, but here we are.
Has Tim Boyle ever gone over his passing yards?
You are talking to the guy that loves betting on punter props, so I'm absolutely going to talk about Tim Boyle. But he had already replaced Zach Wilson. He had a full game before his second start. So one of the things that I was showing a 56% edge on his under. So typically I just move on. But one of the things I do is I sort of mentally play out the game in my head and, thinking about my projection things. And I realized that all of the underlying factors for him were pointing towards the under. And what I mean by that is the Jets were at home and they were actually slight favorites over the Falcons. So I figured, Tim Boyle under center, they're just going to lean on the run game a lot more. I mean, they're slight favorites. Breece Hall was playing amazing at the time. They do not want Tim Boyle stepping back to pass. So I thought, it's either going to be a close or leading game script where they're just going to lean on the run a ton, which is going to cap, Tim Boyle's ceiling when it comes to passing yards, or Tim Boyle's playing like shit. They're down, by a touchdown or so. That's ideal when you have the over on a passing yards prop because they're going to be throwing more. But in this situation, he was probably at risk to get benched for Trevor Siemian. So I thought both scenarios are actually pointing towards the under. So I took my 56% projection. I said it's probably more than 60% when you think about this. So that's just an example of when I think of like the worst case scenario actually leads to the bet hitting as well. I'm kind of going outside of my projections at that point. So that's why it's a mixture of an art and science when I'm attacking these props, because there's the human element. That's where it helps being like an NFL expert, knowing these situations. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. The Jets ended up trailing at some point. Tim Boyle had a bad drive, and they benched him, and Trevor Siemian came in, so the bet hit. But that's just an example of like how I think about the prop before I even lock it in. I try to think about all the different scenarios on how it could win or lose.
Yeah, to spell it out, what Sean is saying, one of the best situations that it's somewhat rare, but it happens enough. And even as a casual fan, I think, you will notice this when it does come up. Quarterbacks who are at risk of being benched, just hammer their unders. You could go across the board, under completions, under attempts, under rushing yards, under passing yards. I mean, I did that for Cam Newton. There was I think it was the pandemic year when he was quarterback in the Patriots, and the Rams had a really good defense. I think it was coached by Wade Phillips. They had all these studs, Aaron Donald, I think Jalen Ramsey, and
It's a Thursday night game.
Yeah, and the Patriots were terrible at the time on offense, but there are certain games they could just kind of run around long enough to stay in it. But this was a game where the Rams had a good offense. I was looking at this game. There's no way Cam Newton is having any success against this defense. And if he doesn't have success against this defense, there's a very high likelihood that he just gets benched. I think at the time they had Jarrett Stidham, who had played well in the preseason, so I think they wanted to maybe get a look at him. I think that's what it was. And so, yeah, you just hammer unders, and that's a way. If your books are letting you parlay those, even better. But I mean, that if you really want to go ham on a game and you're looking for a spot, just be that guy that finds, or that guy or gal who finds when quarterbacks are going to have a short leash or at risk of benching. I mean, every Vikings quarterback last year, right? And it could also be because the team has a bad O-line, so a quarterback could be more of an injury / bench risk. Like Daniel Jones left a bunch of games last year before he ultimately.
Dude, quarterbacks got a lot of quarterbacks got hurt last year.
Yeah,
that was something to monitor going into this year. It was a high volume of quarterbacks got hurt last year.
Yeah, so quarterback benching risks are one of the best situations to take advantage of from an NFL prop standpoint.
Okay, good stuff. Kerner kind of teased this with and I think this is a fascinating discussion. I'm sure this requires a lot of discipline. And shout out to the Bet What Happens Live crew, Nick Giffen, Grant Neefer. I think you guys have been a part of that in previous times. Okay, Sean. Okay, very good. A gambler approaching live betting player props. And a lot of times that could be at halftime, right? When you think a team might make adjustments, or you have an idea of what the game script is and who's trailing, who has the lead, and that introduces a whole bit of ideas here. So do's and don'ts, Raybon, to live betting player props, and when maybe and there are opportunities, I'm sure, where the time is right.
Yeah, so I would say first thing is what I like to do when I'm live betting, and this could also just apply to sides and totals, but before you just jump in and just start, pressing, bet now, just look at the way the lines are moving as the game is progressing. So get an idea of, okay, let's say you're watching an NFL game, a team wins the coin toss, maybe they don't receive anymore. So a team loses the coin toss, gets the ball first, goes down the field, and scores an early touchdown, and they're already a big favorite. Well, look at the receiver props and look at how much did they come down because of the projected game script. Get an idea of just how the books are moving the lines, because a lot of times for these live props, it's pretty much strictly algorithm by the books, and they're not just sitting there watching the game too and updating in real time. They have somebody kind of overseeing it, but it's going to kind of be algorithm based. And so you just have to get an idea of how these lines are moving, and that's how you kind of find your edges. And like in NBA, a lot of times a player may start 0 for 5 in the first 3 minutes of the game, but if he's a star player, or just a decent offensive player, the fact that he got 5 shots up that quickly means he's probably not going to just disappear for the rest of the game, but his points prop may have gone down 2-4 points. So that's when you want to kind of jump in, and also injuries. If you see a player go down, especially an important player, star player, there's somebody's going to benefit from that, and so you could hit there their prop. But I think the biggest edge for NFL, and Sean and I always kind of text about this during some of these island games, is you'll have a team up, 2-3 scores heading into halftime, and you like the team that's losing, you could just hammer the unders on their running back props because they're not going to run the ball much in the second half. You could target their receiving back overs. You could fade their, early down back. You could target their receivers and vice versa for the team that's ahead. So anytime there's a wide spread in the score, like a team is up or down by a lot of points, there's usually going to be some value to be had due to game script in the prop market.
Sean, thoughts on the live angles to player props?
Yeah, so first off, shout out again to Nick Giffen and the Bet What Happens live show. I think he does an excellent job going over, the live player prop tool we created and kind of going over the process during a game of why we're showing value. And as Raybon mentioned, it does come down a lot to game flow, where if a team's trailing, their passing rate's going to be higher, whereas the team with the lead, their rush rate's going to be higher. But interestingly enough, sometimes the value we show can go against the grain a bit because, everyone, the live market has gotten a lot sharper. Everybody is pretty much aware of how game flow does dictate play calling. But oftentimes the market overlooks how quickly the game flow can actually flip.
Mm-hmm.
A team can come back and score a couple of touchdowns, and all of a sudden now they have the lead and they're running the ball at a higher rate. So that's kind of baked into our projections, and sometimes we show value kind of going against that thought process. But again, every case is different. One other thing I wanted to talk about with live betting is I've used it sometimes to attack specific props that I liked pregame as well. The best example of this was Khalil Herbert a couple years. I took the over on his rushing prop. It was, something like 23.5 rushing yards. He was backing up David Montgomery at the time. But the Bears running back rotation was pretty much set in stone every game, where David Montgomery would take the first 2 drives all to himself, and then Khalil Herbert would take the 3rd drive all to himself. So what I did was I bet Khalil Herbert over pregame. But also, at the end of the Bears' 2nd drive, once David Montgomery had played every single snap at that point, I alerted our Discord. I'm attacking Khalil Herbert's over because his prop actually went down a few yards, but I didn't expect him to have a touch by then. So the like Raybon mentioned, some of the props are algorithm based. So his prop went down a few yards, even though I didn't expect him to touch the ball. Sure enough, he got the entire 3rd drive to himself, and I think he cleared the prop on that drive. But sometimes based on player rotations and stuff, you can kind of catch the market off guard and get even more value betting a prop, an angle in game.
Yeah, it's kind of like, crossing sports again, like Raybon, like you had said, like that, very different, obviously, but like in the NBA, if you get a feel for like player rotations and coaching patterns, I know it's a lot different in football. Like it's more like, there's more, the process is a little bit easier. You have to be really committed to watching on a week-to-week basis and understanding a team's process. But it's like, okay, your turn this drive, then it's your turn next drive. Whereas like you got to be monitoring minutes, more specific minutes down to the second when a coach might substituting in the NBA, you can actually see it more on a broadcast as opposed to an NFL game, right? Like,
yeah, I'll give an example. I remember a prop that I had a lot of success with. I think it was a couple years ago. I don't know. I end up keep talking about the Celtics for some reason. I'm not at all a Boston fan or anything like that. But this was when they still had Robert Williams III playing center. So it was a couple years ago in the playoffs, and this is when they were starting to go with their 5 out, everyone's a shooter. So Williams wasn't getting much action. I think it was against the Sixers. And this was when the Celtics were choking pretty much every series away, or about to choke every series away. They were going down at home. They were losing games they should have won. And so, yeah, right. So they had just come off a spot where they had a bad loss, and the Sixers were punking them. And the only thing that I saw that they could change, because remember, it's a game of adjustments in the NBA too, especially the playoffs, was that they need more toughness, because Joel Embiid was just, balling out, and that, like, there was no other thing they could do. Like, they already had all their shooters on the court. So I was like, you know what? Robert Williams has only played maybe 5-10 minutes in the last few games. He's been bench, but so his props were super low, his points, rebounds, assists, all his props, and I just hammered the overs on all of them just in anticipation of that adjustment. And it was before it even got reported that it was a potential thing, or before people even started, the beat reporters started eventually saying, yeah, you know what, I think, we're asking the coach if he's going to get Williams some more minutes because we think that's the best thing. But if you can anticipate those kind of changes before they occur, that's usually a very profitable angle. So it could happen in NFL too. If a guy is maybe a running back is running the ball fine, but he's really struggling in pass protection, so his pass snaps are going to go down. Well, maybe the backup running back has, a receiving prop of like 4.5 yards. So even if he's in there more for pass protection, eventually you're going to run a route. Most running backs still run a route 80-85% of pass snaps, block about 15-20%. So things like that, just anticipating coaching changes based on things that you've seen from watching, or even just box score watching.
Something I'm taking from this episode too is I've done it with, I've definitely done it with Sean. I don't know if I've done it with Chris, like learning how to watch a game, like understand, like for live betting purposes. And then you can probably pick up on things that you guys do ahead into the week, conversations you've had amongst each other in Discord, whatever, but learning how to watch a game to understand, because again, I used the word timing earlier. You got to be on it because things are changing so quickly. Markets are moving as a particular drive happens. But learning how to watch a game, that would be quite the experience. If I didn't work for the company, if someone else could get that opportunity to learn how to watch, just learn from you how you watch a game and how you go about your live betting process. So, all right, let's wrap with this. We'll have a little fun to wrap it up. What is, Chris, your ultimate thrill betting a player prop experience? Or, and this can be like a generic example.
I love the obscure players with the super low props and still betting them under, because books tend to put those lines out as traps. If there's like, Sean will usually ping me anytime books list like a third string tight end, like Mercedes Lewis over under 1.5 yards or something like that. A lot of people look at that and say, oh man, 2 yards, that's easy. Like, yeah, he'll get over that. A lot of times it's even in extreme examples, a half yard. And the one I remember is Ray McLeod a couple years ago in the playoffs. With his receiving yardage prop was a half yard, and so I slammed the under because I didn't expect him to run more than like 1-2 routes, and he could also get bubble screens behind the line of scrimmage, so he could catch a pass for -1 yards or 0 yards and still go over the negative half yard. So I just like sticking it to sports books. It's like my degenerate, ridiculous.
What was
thing But yeah,
what was the recent example? Was it Elijah Mitchell from the Niners?
Yeah, it's under a half a carry or under 1.5 carries in the Super Bowl. And I think he got exactly 1 or something like that. Yeah, those are.
But that market moved during the week, I think, from a half to 1.5. That's again, that goes back to you got to keep an eye. Okay, that's one I remember that you bet. I think Stuckey was on it too.
Oh yeah.
Sean, you ultimate thrill betting a player prop?
I mean, I've probably bet on 1 million player props. I think they're always the best sweat, whether it's a bad beat or an amazing win. But I think I've been having a lot of fun lately, knowing just a lot of people are tailing the props that I give out, and being in our Discord, I'm able to kind of talk about it, sweat it, celebrate when it wins, share in our misery when it loses. But I think the most fun was actually being in person wildcard weekend in New Jersey with a lot of people that, watched Convince Me, or read our articles and things like that. And the first game was the Texans-Browns game. I had Dalton Schultz under 42.5 receiving yards. And I think it was the very first drive of the game. He ran an out pattern. He was like wide open for 15 yards and he dropped it. And everybody at the bar, or a lot of people at the bar, turned and looked at me, and I was like, about to faint. And then, later in that half, he ended up catching like a 35-yard catch. And everybody there was, gasping and looking at me. And I thought it was toast at that point. But then he went the entire second half, not catching another ball, and it stayed under. But I think just, hanging out with people, sweating it, just when it comes to player props, like I said earlier, you're just betting on one specific outcome, one specific stat. I think it makes the game more enjoyable, a little bit more nerve-wracking. But again, I think sharing that experience with people, whether our Discord or in person, has been one of like the best experiences when it comes to player prop betting.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's rewarding too, even if it doesn't go well and it doesn't hit, if your process plays out. Like
exactly,
and I know that, and it's like annoying. Like, all right, you dropped it. Dalton Schultz drops a ball, or or a player that you hit an under on and he's not out there as much as you thought he was not going to be out. So there is some vindication, especially in that live setting with whether it be friends, coworkers, where you say to yourself, it's like it's the adage, like smart, it's a good bet, even though it didn't win kind of thing, or the process it played out, but you had some shit luck on your side. So good stuff. If you're looking for access to Action Pro this NFL season, now is the best time to sign up for less than $10 a month, less than $10. Get a year of Action Pro access, which includes sides, totals, player prop picks, and projection edges from these guys, Sean Kerner and his Action Network analytics team across all of our sports, access to premium articles from the top experts, and so much more. To sign up now, visit actionnetwork.com/pricing, or just follow the link in this episode description. Sean, anything you'd like to share on that front, where people can maybe what people are going to get themselves into?
Yeah, again, just follow us on the Action app, me and Chris. You can get all our picks there. Usually we're giving out analysis on every prop, whether it's articles or shows, but the Action app is the best place to find our stuff. Anything
to plug there, Chris, on the pro side of things, the Action Pro account?
Yeah, be sure to just like Sean said, just subscribe to Action Pro, and you're just gonna get so much good information. In addition to just us, you're gonna get all the tools to fish for yourself. You're gonna get the amount of money and bets on each game. You're gonna get all our projections and the biggest edges in props, live updated prop odds. When the game is in progress. So if you do want to partake in those live bets, you can do that. So yeah, a lot of great stuff there with Action Pro, very indispensable tool.
Okay, and Chris is making his run to 2 decades like Kerner. Kerner, do we have to be concerned? I mean, 2 decades is a long time. I mean, Brady's now in the booth after 2 decades of playing the position. So do we have to worry about you at all, like going into year 21? Or
just because I'm old, or what do you mean?
No, I didn't call you old. I meant your tenure is.
I mean, no, I feel great.
Okay, good.
And even if I physically wasn't able to, run routes or throw passes, doesn't matter. I'm just using, my keyboard. So I could go with this another 20 plus years, hopefully.
Good. All right. Wanted to make sure we got that on the record. Very good. All right. Sean Kerner, our director of predictive analytics, Chris Raybon. These guys are available to you in the free award-winning Action Network app, ready and locked and loaded for another NFL season of betting NFL player props. If you haven't already, you can check out the Expert's Guide to Fantasy Football, which came out last week. Features Sean and Chris, available right here on the Action Network podcast. Brendan Glasheen signing off. Thanks for tuning in. The Action Network podcast is presented by BetMGM. Best of luck betting NFL player props in 2024.